Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. Today I'm reviewing You Were Never Really Here. This was directed by Lynne Ramsay, the woman behind Let's Talk About Kevin, and stars Joaquin Phoenix. It really looks at Joe, played by Joaquin Phoenix, a man who's battle-scarred from being in the Marines and the FBI, and he's really a tormented and tortured soul. That the only comfort he finds is looking after his elderly mother. And there's a lot of stuff when he was a child that's really had a detrimental effect on him. Now the way he makes money, he's ultimately taking on jobs where he goes in and saves young children from sex trafficking. Now this is the thing that sort of drives him and pushes him along. He can become quite violent in regards to saving these young kids, and he's quite sort of tortured man who doesn't really care too much about things and just ultimately has given up on life. And his only motivation, the only drive he has, is saving these young kids, and ultimately he's a gun for hire. One particular case he takes on, looking for Nina, a young 13-year-old senator's daughter, ultimately goes bad. Things don't go quite according to plan, and it's ultimately him trying to make sense of what's going on, and it has a detrimental effect on him and the people around him and the people he cares about. And this all leads to him trying to find this young girl, trying to down the people who've taken her and caused her so much pain and abuse. And he does all this with the only weapon that he carries, a hammer. And it's quite brutal that the way he uses that hammer to achieve his goals. This all leads to a kind of a confrontational ending that you're not quite sure what's going to happen, or you're not quite sure what's going to happen to him or the young girl. And it's a really sort of intense film that leads to quite a shocking ending. I like this. I was a film that I'm late to the party with. I had trouble getting a hold of it, and this is the first time being able to actually access it and watch it. And this film is quite eye-opening. It's shocking at times. There's a lot of violence in it, and his character is so tortured and so plagued by hallucinations and nightmares and things he's going through. He's such a damaged character, a truly damaged character, that just sort of wanders around in life, and him trying to help these young kids escape sexual slavery is his driving force. And the violence he unleashes on the people responsible is just horrific at times. Mark my words, this is definitely not a film for the faint of heart, but it's so interesting and intense and such a fascinating film. But what really carries the kind of interesting story is Joaquin Phoenix's performance. An actor who's truly at the top of his game, who's able to transform himself physically into what he needs to do to create these particular characters he's portraying. And he's so powerful in this, and he can really tap into that damaged sort of character in such a really fantastic way. There's some really great scenes within the film, and it's kind of interesting, but doesn't really pick up until he goes to find the young girl, Nina. And this is where the film really starts to pick up and take off. And the choices he makes along the way are quite extraordinary. I really like watching him on screen. There's something about him that draws you into the film, I think, and into the characters he portrays. I really wish his brother River was around. I would love to have seen these two brothers act on screen. I think it would have been quite extraordinary to see their different take on things and the way their processes were, and it would have been very interesting. I think Lynne Ramsay has done a really fantastic job with this. She's a director who really just makes the film she wants to make. She doesn't apologise for what she puts in them, and she doesn't apologise for what she shows on screen. And her most known sort of film that she came from is We Need to Talk About Kevin, which was also based upon a book much like this is. That's a film I haven't seen, but after watching this I really want to see. But it's a very intense and dark film. There's a lot of violence, like I said. There's a lot of twists and turns. It's a very shadowy, dark area that this film looks at. The way that this character maneuvers through the world, and he's sort of like a ghost in a way. He's half the man he used to be. He's a shell of a person, ultimately. He's just been affected so much by the things he's experienced within the army and within the FBI and in the roles that he had taken on. And the young actress Ekaterina Samsonov, I think that's how you say her name, who plays Nina, she's quite extraordinary in the film. She just has a real presence on screen, and she plays such a really damaged character as well. And I think that's what the real interesting thing about this film for me is. You've got Joaquin Phoenix's character, Joe, who's very damaged. And you've got Nina, who's a very damaged character as well. And the way they there's a connection between them. There's a camaraderie, there's an understanding. And it feels like, for Joe, it's the first person that can really understand the things he's gone through in a way. And he understands in a way what she's been through, to a point, I guess, obviously. But it's just an interesting dynamic between these two characters, and the way he really cares for her and tries to help her and stop these bad guys from doing what they do. What I got from this film, a real big sense of this film, is, to me, it was this generation's Taxi Driver. I know I said that about First Reform, but it really feels like this. You've got this character, Joe, much like Travis Bickle, who doesn't really fit in to society. He doesn't know his place and doesn't know where he fits in after experiences he's had, being through war, and the experiences that Joe's had through being in war and part of the FBI. And it's sort of an interesting contrast between these two films, because also in Taxi Driver, he helps this young prostitute girl by killing the people, her pimp, and killing the people involved in this sort of world, much like Joe does. He goes after the people who've tried to hurt this young girl and killed them. So it's very interesting elements. It's dark. Both films feature an anti-hero, but he's a character you sort of can get behind, even though he's a bit prickly and hard to read. It's like Taxi Driver without the voiceover. It feels like the idea of Nicholas Winding Refn, if he had directed Taxi Driver, this is what this film feels like. It has a lot of his flair in it, the feeling unsettlingness and the darkness just underneath the surface, much like David Lynch. But this is really an interesting film that Lynne Ramsay's crafted, and he introducing these particular elements. There is some criticism. The only criticisms I would have with this film is ultimately there are particular scenes where characters are expressing some emotion, but you don't quite understand why or where that comes from. Especially towards the end, there's one particular scene where Joaquin Phoenix's character sort of breaks down, but you don't quite know why. You don't know why he's broken down in such a way and what effect the thing that he's involved in has on him. And I'm quite a bit confused with that. But there are some other moments in it, particular music that's used, that's a bit left of centre, but it really works for the film. And these particular moments he has with characters that are very brief, but they serve a purpose. The only real character he talks a lot to is his mother, but it's a character that doesn't speak a lot through the film. He doesn't have a lot of dialogue at all with anybody. It's sort of a fly on the wall, look at this guy, and we see what he goes through. The other things I really liked about it are, I like when we first see him, we're not quite sure what he does or why he's doing it. We sort of see the aftermath of something he's been involved in, or some young person he's been able to help. We don't quite know what's going on. And there's just hints at particular things and little bits of flashbacks. And there's flashbacks throughout the film which reveal who he is as a person. I kind of like that as well. But when we ultimately see what he's capable of and what he can do and what he does, it's quite striking and powerful. Once we see this is shot through surveillance cameras, and it's very interesting that they chose to do it that way. And the music they used and the sequences that take place after that is quite powerful. It's just quite a shocking and surprising film, but I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It was not something I'd watch all the time, but it's a film that I'm glad I got to see. It is dark in moments. It reminds me of 8mm at times and other dark films like that. But there's something really powerful about it. It sort of has a bit of Neon Demon feel about it as well, and Drive, like I said, Nicholas Winding Refn sort of films, it feels a bit like that. And it has an interesting ending. I'm not going to give anything away if you haven't seen it, but it's a very interesting ending. There's some powerful imagery in it. Particular scenes is really powerful imagery. And we wanted him to find hope and purpose in his life. But whether he's capable of that anymore, I do not know. But I liked what I saw here, even though it was very confrontational and a very shocking subject matter that I looked at. Final verdict. Look, if you like something that's a bit different, if you don't mind a little darkness to particular films, you might enjoy this. If you want to see Joaquin Phoenix give another fantastic performance, very powerful, then this is definitely a film for you. I don't know if this film's going to be for everyone due to its subject matter, its violence and the darkness within it, but it will find an audience with those particular people who like a unique story told in an interesting way. I'm going to give You Were Never Really Here 4 out of 5. I enjoyed my experience with this film, even though it was gritty and dark, for the story, and stayed for Joaquin Phoenix's performance, which is absolutely fantastic. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit subscribe down the bottom. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.